at how all of this is impacting Joe Biden in the polls. A new ABC News Ipsos opinion poll has shown the president's approval rating on a number of key issues is now declining. While a majority of American voters still approve the signature issues of President Biden's campaign and presidency, the poll highlights a marked decline in President Biden's overall approval ratings since the summer. The COVID-19 response, economic recovery, and rebuilding America's infrastructure are some of the issues where Americans still approve of the Democratic Party's president's work. But he has begun to lose ground despite some of those positive trends. Just over 1 in 3 independents now approves of the work Joe Biden is doing. Only around 1 in 10 Republicans view the Biden president positively. A detailed look at the findings reveal that 57% of Americans approve of the president's response to COVID-19, but his approval rating on handling the pandemic is now 15 points lower than it was at the end of March. 51% approve of his economic recovery plan, but Biden's approval rating on the same issue is 9 points lower than it was back in March. This marks an overall decline driven by a decrease in support and a slump in sentiment over the past few months. From July, the president's standing on Afghanistan has eroded particularly badly. 2 months ago, 55% approved of the president's handling of the withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan. But now, after the botched withdrawal operation, only 38% of voters say they approve. Immigration, gun violence, Afghanistan and crime are issues that the president is faring less well on. 38%, slightly more than a third, approve of the job he's doing on gun violence. Only a third of Americans approve of his handling of immigration and the situation at the US-Mexico border. And 43% approve of his response to crime. On these issues, just over 1 in 3 independents approve of the job Biden is doing, and he receives positive marks from only around 1 in 10 Republicans. According to analysts, the dissatisfaction among Republicans and independents is primarily fueling the decline in Joe Biden's approval ratings. So back to Susan Tehrani, live for us from New York. Susan, there are clear signs in these polls that Democrat voters are standing with Joe Biden and that his support among them is not slipping. But to see some of these trends, 14 and 15 percentage points difference between Joe Biden standing back in the spring and Joe Biden standing today on a number of these issues, that is not at all where the White House thought it would be or wants to be.
No, absolutely not. And I think that ultimately, while the White House probably betted on the issue of Afghanistan, that it would become a news trend and it's a foreign policy trend, and, it would go away from the hearts and minds of the American people. First of all, Afghanistan didn't. But for the American people, the issue of crime in big cities, the issue of COVID and the shadow pandemic, as it's being called right now, which goes into unemployment, mental health issues, kids going back to school with masks, and the issue of COVID being highly politicized at this point, with the mandates on the one hand and not getting a clear answer on vaccines on the other, has really hit hard for many Americans. And I think Joe Biden is really seeing the effects on that, and he hasn't been able to ultimately bring Americans together as he had promised. And remember, this was a president that really betted on COVID during his presidential campaign. And, for what it is, you could blame it on the Delta variant. COVID doesn't know politics, but perhaps, this is where he stands right now. He wasn't able to bring it under control, and we see the ripple effects of that going through in other aspects as well. And here we are. But I think the crime rates in a lot of Democratic cities is something that he has to deal with ultimately, and people are really noticing that in blue states, and that's why we see that among some Democrats as well. The points coming down in those cities and those populations.
Susan Tehrani, multiple issues. Yeah. Multiple issues besetting President Biden. That's Susan Tehrani, WION's correspondent, live in New York. Let's see if the president can thread the needle on Capitol Hill